We do have 3 presentations booked for this morning's session. Starting with mine, so we'll kick off with mine, followed by Matt Picker and Professor Mike Zukri. Yes, thank you. All right, well, just to kick it off, I need a show of hands. How many of you kept up with March Madness, the Final Four, and the NCAA Men's Division I or Women's Division I championships this past month and week? Anybody in here? Well, it is very relevant to my own study because I investigated the relationships between perceptions of student athletes, coaches' leadership, and those student athletes' self-reported satisfaction, athletic, and academic performance. So my study was important because I explored the experiences of college athletes. And my theory was that the higher the student athletes rated their coaches' leadership practices, the higher their satisfaction and their performance. And there are not enough studies out there that have measured how coaches' leadership impacts non-athletic measures, including academics. Now, the research question that I had was, is there a relationship between student athletes' perceptions of their college coaches' leadership and those student athletes' satisfaction, athletic, and academic performance? And if I pass out the handouts to you, hopefully you can take a better look at the conceptual definitions of each of those variables. Those included the leadership practices as well as athlete satisfaction subscales and athletic and academic performance. I controlled for the demographics of coach and student athlete gender, athletes experience, sport, and college division. I conducted my methods between October 2014 and June 2015. I administered Bremer and Chalaterized Athlete Satisfaction Questionnaire, or the ASQ, as well as Kuz's and Posner's Leadership Practices Inventory, or the LPI Observer Form, for the student athletes to rate their coaches' leadership, as well as a performance and demographic survey that I developed. The student athlete sample was 105 across the state of Texas. Now, after I collected my data, I ran several statistical analyses, starting with the descriptive statistics of all 27 of the variables, as well as multiple regression analyses to determine the significant predictors of satisfaction and performance, as well as a bivariate correlation matrix between the continuous variables. As far as the dichotomous and the categorical variables are concerned, I ran an independent samples t-test and a one-way ANOVA with a Scheffé post-hoc test, respectively. Now, the null hypotheses that I was testing for from the regression analyses stated that there is no relationship between student athletes' perceptions of their intercollegiate coaches and the student athletes' self-reported satisfaction with these 15 ASQ subscales. Those included, and if you want to follow along with the handout that included the definitions of those variables, individual and team performance, ability utilization, strategy, personal treatment, training and instruction, team task contribution, team social contribution, ethics, team integration, personal dedication, budget, medical personnel, academic support services, external agents, and athletic and academic performance when controlling for the demographic variables in brief. My regression analyses revealed that 1 to 2 leadership practices were significant predictors of all 15 of the ASQ subscales, or the satisfaction of the athletes. Therefore, I rejected the first 15 null hypotheses. In terms of demographics, I did run an independent samples t-test for Null Hypothesis 4 and Null Hypothesis 6. And they revealed that female coaches, student athletes, reported significantly higher satisfaction with strategy from the 4th Null Hypothesis and with training and instruction for the 6th Null Hypothesis than student athletes of male coaches. For the 16th Null Hypothesis, measuring self-reported athletic performance, I found that Inspire Shared Vision leadership practice was the significant predictor, which implies that when a coach communicates foresight and clearly behaves according to the goals set for the team, more likely the athlete is going to feel motivated and perceive the performance as such in the long run. For the 17th Null Hypothesis, measuring academic performance from the student athlete's grade point average on a 4.0 scale, no leadership practices were shown to be significant. However, there was a possible range restriction between the minimum 2.5 GPA and the maximum 4.0 of the student athlete, which may come from grade point average minimums that student athletes have to target in order to participate in their respective sports. But this may have created a possible type 2 error potential. As far as demographics are concerned, for student athlete gender, female student athletes reported significantly higher GPAs than their male counterparts. And for playing performance or playing experience, there actually was a significant positive relationship, which means that the longer the student athlete played their sport at the college level, the higher they reported their academic performance. Now, my graphical model illustrates the relationships between leadership practices and the dependent variables. The plus signs represent that there was a significant positive relationship between leadership and athlete satisfaction, as well as between leadership and athletic performance. This indicates that the higher the student athlete rated the coach on leadership, the higher the levels of satisfaction, and likewise with athletic performance. This slash represents that there was no significant relationship found between leadership and academic performance in this study. Now, to conclude, I did come across some limitations in my discourse, starting with obtaining a convenient sample, as well as seeking the self-reports of performance from the student athletes, which may have imposed a possible overestimation of their own ratings. Most of all, my limitation, my main one, was that I measured 27 variables, which meant that my total instrument included almost 100 question items, making it cumbersome enough for college athletes to complete, therefore yielding to the low sample size of 105 student-athlete participants. Now, for future research, I would recommend longitudinal studies measuring retention and graduation rates of the student-athlete, as well as measuring the differences between teachers and coaches' leadership, as well as the differences between academic satisfaction of athletes and non-athletes. And lastly, if I were to administer the ASQ again, then I would only seek out specific satisfaction subscales because the ASQ alone contains 56 items by itself. Here are the sources for my problem statement and the instruments that I used in this study, and I appreciate all of you for attending. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about my project?
One question.
Yes,
I thought this was a great topic. One of the questions I had was, do you think there could be a difference between athletes who play on like sports teams, such as basketball or soccer players, versus more individualistic sports, such as like runners or something?
Excellent point, and as a matter of fact, I did notice a difference in the literature that I reviewed, that there definitely was differences in terms of satisfaction with the coach, and I would like to do further study to investigate it further because there were mixed significant results. In this particular study, I actually had samples from different sports that included both individual, such as swimming, or team sports, such as soccer. So that is an excellent question, and I would like to add that in my future studies as well. Thank you, Matt.